Hello, welcome to the Trews. I'm Russell Brand, host of the Trews. Subscribe here to Trews. True news, true news, true news. Today's Trews focuses on events in Ottawa, in Canada, and the recent violent actions that have taken place there. How does this relate to a broader international narrative? Are we being told the truth by conventional media? Let's have a look for some true news.
These are two attacks in just 2 days in Canada. First of all, two people rammed down in Quebec, two soldiers. One of them died. The attacker was later killed by police. Now what we're seeing in Ottawa is Parliament in lockdown. A shooter, a gunman opening fire first at the War Memorial and then in Parliament.
So far, the only facts we have is that there's been two incidents of violence in a place that you're not used to hearing violence from. So that's really all we know so far.
The city is in lockdown, and Ottawa, normally not much news comes out of Ottawa.
But on the bright side, some news out of Ottawa.
But of course, it is the Canadian capital, and Canada has been getting involved with the effort to combat the Islamic State group.
Oh! Just throw that in. The Islamic State group. Initially, we're given the information there's been two acts of violence. Now, Islamic State is being mentioned. But at the moment, I don't know how that connection has been made. I don't know. I just heard it on the news.
My fellow Canadians.
What is this standing between flags business? Like, Cameron was doing it a little while ago. I don't like leaders standing between flags like they're sort of bewinged angels of justice.
For the second time this week, there has been a brutal and violent attack on our soil.
Interesting. On the soil.
Today, our thoughts and prayers are with the family and friends of Corporal Nathan Cirillo of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders. Corporal Cirillo was killed today, murdered in cold blood.
It's quite evocative language that's being used here. This doesn't seem like... What's interesting is this speech has an agenda. There's an intention behind it. That's not informational language, is it? Because if you look at Stephen Harper there, and I've been to Canada, they hate him. I don't know how he gets to be leader. It's probably because democracy don't work properly. You can tell that he's leading you somewhere with this, like his use of the militaristic titles, the use of the phrase "in cold blood." I mean, that's like an interesting. Like, you don't know what mood people are in when they do a murder. Oh, it's like cold blood. They could have been in a frantic state of febrile passion, for all we know. This is an attempt to editorialise and present the information, but to help us reach what conclusion, Mr. Harper?
As he provided a ceremonial honour guard at Canada's National War Memorial. That sacred place that pays tribute to those who gave their lives so that we can live in a free, democratic, and safe society.
Yeah, I don't know, Steve. I don't know if the function of the military is for the domestic population to live in a safe and free democratic society. That sounds like a presumption that might need some analysis. It seems like what I think is to preserve the interests of powerful groups of people at the top of society and to prevent any dialogue occurring that could shift that paradigm in any way. But fair enough, Steve, you're doing a speech, carry on.
Likewise, our thoughts and prayers remain also with the family and friends of Warrant Officer Patrice Vincent, who was killed earlier this week by an ISIL-inspired terrorist.
Hold on a minute, you don't know what's inspiring a person. That's a massive assumption.
Fellow Canadians, in the days to come, we will learn more about the terrorist and any accomplices he may have had.
Yeah, perhaps shut up till then, maybe.
We are also reminded that attacks on our security personnel and on our institutions of governance are, by their very nature, attacks on our country, on our values, on our society, on us Canadians.
It's interesting, that what he's telling you is how to think. What should I think of this act of violence? Well, let there be no doubt there's an attack on our Canadian values and our freedom. That's a very familiar and recognisable type of speech, isn't it? When these things happen, it's an attack on all of us. Is it? Is it really? Are those institutions protecting all of us? I know that's what you're saying, but I mean, where's the evidence, Steve?
But let there be no misunderstanding. We will not be intimidated. Canada will never be intimidated.
Weird thing to say about Canada. Yeah, don't let Canada be... How can Canada be intimidated? It's only some earth and a flag. How's that earth and flag? Well, it looks pretty confident, actually. It's not intimidating, is it? Well, no, because, it's a land mass and some fabric with a leaf on it, and you can't really intimidate that. That's a very simplistic and emotive type of language to apply to a concept.
In fact, this will lead us to strengthen our resolve and redouble our efforts, and those of our national security agencies,
The code there is we're giving more power to the military and government institutions, and we'll use that power how we want to because you're under threat. And we don't want Canada to be intimidated. Hey, I want to be free to do you want Canada to be intimidated? Look at that flag. Can you imagine it being all intimidated, all listless? I don't want that. Right, give us your computer.
To take all necessary steps to identify and counter threats and keep Canada safe here at home.
The other important thing is that we keep mentioning Islamic State and ISIL. Why is he mentioning that? Because so far all they know is that one fella, they said, was a jihadist sympathiser, and the other person is a newly converted Muslim or a recent Muslim convert. But also, the guy that's a recent Muslim convert also has mental health issues. If you met a person and like you're having a cup of tea with them, and you go, tell me about yourself. Oh, I recently converted to Islam, did you? Yeah, also I've got mental health issues. And then a minute later, he starts smashing the plates up. I'd go, is that Islam you're doing that for? Okay, he said he mentally ill a minute ago. Mate, you're mentally ill, stop smashing the plates up. Is this in the Quran? Does it say stuff about smashing the plates up? Are you in ISIL? Right, it's convenient for their argument.
Just as it will lead us to strengthen our resolve and redouble our efforts to work with our allies around the world and fight against the terrorist organizations who brutalize those in other countries with the hope of bringing their savagery to our shores.
Brutalise other countries, hope of bringing their savagery to our shores. I wonder how people in the Middle East feel about the constant occupation of Western forces supporting industries and corporations over there that benefit from their resources.
They will have no safe haven.
What's interesting about that is that a lot of what Steve Harper says sounds very reasonable. You think, yeah, there's been an attack on an institution, there's been an attack on military personnel. That's wrong that's happened. But it's what happens to that information, how that information is used that's interesting. Because a fella called Justin Bourque shot and killed 3 Canadian mounted police officers in Moncton, New Brunswick. And that was in June. And when that happened, no mention of terror was made, although the murders themselves bore the hallmarks of a conservative and conspiratorial anti-state worldview, reminiscent of Norwegian killer Anders Breivik. What's interesting is when a murder like that happens, which is relatively recent in Canadian history, that isn't a useful murder. That murder is an attack again on mounted police, institutional figures. It's out of nowhere. You don't go on the news there and go, right, we've got to watch out for white people that are inspired by an individualistic, materialistic corporate culture that's nihilistic and selfish and greedy, because that isn't convenient to the objectives of the Canadian government and the Canadian government's allies. They're part of a broader theme, a broader narrative. What's important is how are these murders used to advance an argument? Let's see what Barack Obama's saying. He's jumping on the bandwagon.
And it's very important, I think, for us to recognize that when it comes to dealing with terrorist activity, that Canada and the United States has to be entirely in sync.
No, not when it comes to dealing with terrorist activity. When it comes to dealing with our business interests abroad. When it comes to dealing with an accepted narrative of enforcing government power on a domestic population and supporting corporate power abroad, it's important that the USA and Canada and the transnational corporate-led and dominated world speak cohesively. That's why it don't matter if a white geezer kills 3 Mounties, but it does matter if a recent Muslim convert shoots a member of the Canadian services.
We have in the past. I'm confident we will continue to do so in the future.
Barack Obama, let's face it, he ain't the same guy anymore, is he? Look at him. Look, I'm sorry. Yes, we can change. I'm very, very tired. Look at his face. He's like been wrung out. I believe we can make a better America. Oh, look at me. I'm a black guy. I'm the president now. It's all going to be all right. Look at my kids and that. Look at my missus. It's all going to be cool. Oh, fucking hell. Look, just go over there. Get as much oil as you can. It's to do with Islam and Muslims and ISIL. I think I'm knackered. For fuck's sake. I've only got a couple more months in a job. Just let me get through this.
So, obviously, we're all shaken by it.
Did you care about the 3 Mounties? No, I won't share about that. It's not useful to the broader narrative of our requirements abroad and domestically to impose control on our populations. Shoot as many Mounties if you want, if you're white. Drive a car where you want if you're white. Don't be a bloody Muslim, though, and do it, because then we will use that to our advantage.
This obviously is something that we'll make sure to factor in the ongoing efforts that we have to counter terrorist attacks.
It's even strapping here. No info yet Yeah, but it's definitely to do with Islam, isn't it? Probably this. I mean, it would be good if it was. It'd been half be inconvenient. Do you remember when that Oklahoma bomber, Tim McVeigh, blew it up? Oh, there's been a bombing. Oh, it's blown up that building. It was a white bloke. Oh, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Soon a brown person will do something, and then we can have our wars.
There are a lot of possible threats that are foiled or disrupted that don't always get reported on.
So, like, just to let you know that these are not the mad rants of a paranoid lunatic, well, they might be, but they also happen to be true. After 9/11, the Patriot Act in America extended state surveillance powers. So that's what they do. And do you remember in Steve Harper in his speech, Canada cannot be intimidated. Keep that flag all glossy and stiff and pert. Like, you know, they're going to use it to impose new legislation that means that they'll be able to spy on domestic population and to advance aggression in the Middle East to further their own business interests. That's what happened. That's what happened here. After 9/11 in Guantanamo Bay, inmates were tortured and held without charges. Make no mistake about it, said George W. Bush in 2005, this is a war against people who profess an ideology and they use terror as a means to achieve their objectives. That's him. He's the person. It's a war against people who profess an ideology, yeah, capitalism, consumerism, neoliberalism, and we use terror as a means to achieve their objectives. If that terror fits in with our template, we will use that terror. It's incredible. I think George W. Bush was perhaps some sort of brilliant existentialist poet. Riddle me this. Who is the terrorist? Here's our own Theresa May now in front of a disturbing map of Britain made out of Union Jacks.
But it's ridiculous that the British government should have to go to such lengths to get rid of dangerous foreigners.
Oh, Theresa, no, don't say dangerous foreigners. Dangerous foreigners coming over here, stealing our jobs and women. You're not actually a politician. Hasn't it gone through, isn't there like a filtration process? Like me, I'm a comedian. People go, don't ever say that on the telly, Russell, you idiot. That person's got a really good job. She's saying dangerous foreigners on the telly. In the UK, our reaction to the 2005 London bombings, Tony Blair, who was the leader then, we now know that what he was secretly doing was waiting to work for a Kazakhstan dictator and take up a job for Q80 oil companies. He said, let no one be in doubt. After 2005, he said, let no one be in doubt. The rules of the game have changed. Is it a game? Well, yeah, to me it is. It's a game where I get to go a bloody good job quite soon.
That's why the next Conservative manifesto will promise to scrap the Human Rights Act.
I mean, who among us wants a Human Rights Act? Can you think of anyone you know that might be affected by a Human Rights Act? Human Rights Act, that's going to have an impact on us. How can someone stand on a stage saying things like, get rid of foreigners and we get rid of human rights and maintain a job and a tartan jacket?
If leaving the European Convention is what it takes to fix our human rights laws, that is what we should do.
The important news, that's the true news, because this is the true, subscribe here. The true news behind this is like during these events, share prices are soaring in America for those who produce coalition bombs and missiles and drones and aircraft participating in the latest war. That's an amazing piece of news. Legislation has been put through in our country, what's it called? The Snoopers Charter. You know, like where it's like, oh, we've got to spy on you for your safety. Whenever they do that data capture stuff, like, what? You've been spying on our Facebook accounts? What? You're looking at our emails? We're doing that to help you. We was going to organise you a birthday party and you've spoiled it. They scare us, then rip us off the whole time. Last month, US warships fired 65.8 million worth of Tomahawk missiles within just 24 hours. If we spent that much on Ebola cures, there'd be no more Ebola. They fired an Ebola cure in one day from a warship. Excuse me, we've got Ebola. Shut up!
The government will soon publish the immigration bill, which will make it easier to get rid of people with no right to be here.
Yeah, get rid of people with no right to be here. What do you mean? Like companies like Vodafone and Starbucks and Amazon and Google that come over here and use our resources, and taxpayers, the taxpayers' resources with workers that have been educated at our expense? No, I meant people who are slightly different.
First, we're going to cut the number of appeal rights.
Right, fuck off! May I appeal? No! I've told you before, I've been to a place where asylum seekers, illegal asylum seekers, get food, legal advice and medicine. While I was there, I wasn't like, honestly, as a human being, go there yourself, check these places out. You don't think like, You bastards, you're having a time of your life here, aren't you? In this undignified line for the most basic human resources. It makes you feel like, shit, we're all human beings. Let's find a way to reach out to one another, to help one another. And if that means that corporations make a bit less profit from illegal wars overseas, then so be it. Why are we bombing in Syria? Well, we've got to help the Syrians. There's some Syrians who want to come and live here. You've got no right. May I appeal? Fuck off. I've got Ebola. Pew! Sorry, we just fired your cure abroad. What's happening is the incidents in Ottawa are being used to advance a narrative that will not only entitle them to further wars abroad, but will entitle them to inhibit our freedoms. That is the true news. That is the true news. Subscribe here to True News.
Nose is a tool that is abused to fool you and to leave you scared and confused. Trews is like the news. If the news was true, I want some Trews. Let's have some Trews.
Hello, I'm Russell Brand, this is The Trews. Do subscribe here. Now, Stephen Fry has got to be one of the most beloved people in this country, if not the entire world. He's made us think about depression, homosexuality, cleverness in a different way. He's General Melchett from Blackadder, for God's sake. He's one of the most beloved figures in our cultural pantheon, and he's clever as all hell. And here I am about to get into a debate, if not an argument, with him, because Stephen Fry really aggressively doesn't believe in God, and I really do believe in God. He went on a TV show to talk about atheism and God. Let's have a look at it now.
Suppose it's all true, and you walk up to the pearly gates and you are confronted by God. What will Stephen Fry say to him, her, or it?
I will basically, what's known as theodicy, I think. I'll say bone cancer in children? What's that about? How dare you? How dare you create a world in which there is such misery that is not our fault? It's not right. It's utterly evil. Why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world which is so full of injustice and pain? Because the God who created this universe, if it was created by God, is quite clearly a maniac, utter maniac. Yes, the world is very splendid, but it also has in it insects whose whole life cycle is to burrow into the eyes of children and make them blind. They eat outwards from the eyes. Why? Why did you do that to us? It's perfectly apparent that he is monstrous, utterly monstrous, and deserves no respect whatsoever. The moment you banish him, your life becomes simpler, purer, cleaner, more worth living, in my opinion.
In a way, what Fry is talking about, in my opinion, is literalism, a literal interpretation of doctrine. In this case, because it's an Irish Catholic interviewer, Gabe Byrne, he's talking about a literal translation of the Gospels. And other than like mentioning some phenomena in nature, like burrowing insects and that, talking entirely about human behaviour and human value systems. Now, Joseph Campbell, the cultural mythologist, said all religions are true in that the metaphor is true. So what Campbell's saying there is that religion is an attempt to explain the unknowable, in the same way that science is an attempt to explain the unknowable. Science can explain the mechanics of the universe and can explain the mechanics of biology and anatomy, but can it ever explain the why? The answer is no, it can never explain why this is happening. What we all want to know is there a reason for us being here? And what is the nature of the universe? What is the nature of our consciousness? This is an interesting book called Biocentrism by someone called Robert Lanza. Here he tackles the idea of creation and addresses the flaws, in the same way that Stephen Fry is addressing the flaws in Christian doctrine. Robert Lanza here addresses the flaws in received physics. In the last few decades, there's been considerable discussion of a basic paradox in the construction of the universe as we know it. For example, if the Big Bang had been 1 part in a million more powerful, it would have rushed out too fast for the galaxies and life to develop. If the strong nuclear force were decreased to 2%, atomic nuclei wouldn't hold together, and plain vanilla hydrogen would be the only kind of atom in the universe. If the gravitational force were decreased by just a hair, stars, including the sun, would not ignite. These are 3 of more than 200 physical parameters within the solar system and universe, so exact that it strains credulity to propose that they are random, even if that's exactly what standard contemporary physics baldly suggests. Terence McKenna, a kind of wacky shaman fella, said that the perspective of contemporary science is give us one free miracle and we'll explain the rest. That free miracle being that the universe sprang into being with these exact rules that are required for life and consciousness to exist. I suppose what Christianity and Islam and Judaism and Hinduism and Jainism and Buddhism are trying to do is make sense of our position, our perspective as awake, conscious, sentient beings within the infinite. For me, as a person who believes in God, my understanding of God is this, that my consciousness emanates from a perspective and it passes through endless filters, the filters of the senses, the subjective filters of the senses and of my own biography. This is good, this is bad, this is wrong, I want that, I don't want that. But behind all of that, there is an awakeness, an awareness that sees it all. And it's in you too, and it's in Stephen Fry, and it's in the man that was interviewing him. It's in all of us, an awakeness, an interconnectivity. None of us can ever know if there is a God, but we do know there is an us. None of us can ever know if there's wrong or right, but we do know there is an us.
What do you think Jesus was then? I think he was a very good soul. He was an inspiration as a teacher. I do think a lot of the things he says are actually nonsense when you examine them. They seem very beautiful, but a bit like the Dalai Lama, they're actually twee and completely impractical. And in that sense, an insult to the human spirit. Like that him who is without sin cast the first stone. At first you think that's rather wonderful. Yes, what hypocrites. How could you possibly have a justice system? Nobody would ever go to prison.
For me, Fry's conclusion that we should abandon God to be free, I believe the opposite, that we should embrace God to be free. Not embrace dogma, not embrace doctrine, but look, because within religion, even the most conventional religions, there's so many beautiful things. In fact, the thing Stephen Fry said there about that he who is without sin cast the first stone comes from a story in which Mary Magdalene, a prostitute, was being condemned, and Christ said, hold on a second, before we all start getting leery about Mary Magdalene, you lot are all perfect, are you? And now Fry says, how would you apply that principle judiciously in contemporary justice? Well, I would say that when you are condemning murderers or paedophiles, to acknowledge within us all is the capacity for evil. That as Solzhenitsyn, the Russian writer, said, the line between good and evil runs not between nations, religions, continents or creeds, but through every human heart. So when you are judging a paedophile, when you are judging the worst kind of criminals imaginable, to acknowledge that the thing in them that has manifest this negativity is also within us, and that our first duty is to negotiate with the negativity within ourselves, and that if we can successfully negotiate with that, then we can create a better society. Jill Bolte Taylor, the neurologist that had a brain hemorrhage in the left side of her brain, experienced consciousness in a different way. When the conscious, nagging, left-sided mind that sees everything in materialistic and macho, rationalistic terms abated, limitless energy became available to her. She noticed that in fact her consciousness was a system of filtration, and when the left brain was quieted, she felt herself as part of a complete consciousness. Now no one can argue that, when a lion eats a gazelle, it can't be very nice for the gazelle, but what you can argue is that in infinite space that doesn't matter. Then the tiny fragment of reality that we experience through our materialistic senses, our eyes that only see a limited range of light, our ears that only hear a limited range of vibration, the things that we experience here, we can't make any absolute conclusions from them. No one knows if there is a God or if there isn't a God. No one knows which interpretation is closest. We know that religion has long been used and continues to be used to justify the objectives of man, whether that's crazy terrorists in Paris or a great big Catholic church that was born of an alliance between an emperor and some radical rebel group. When Constantine converted to Christianity, that's about materialism, that's about intellectual colonialism, and the thing that Fry condemns, I also condemn, because that is materialistic, humanistic dogma. That's not spirituality, that's not mysticism, that's not the acceptance that we are temporary, that our consciousness is connected to all consciousness. It doesn't matter where you come from, whether it's Freudian analysis or Darwinianism or the analysis of the cosmos. From the quantum to the cosmic, there is an unknown force behind things.
What's your attitude to people who say, well, I'm not religious, but I'm very spiritual? I have to be I have to say, I get very worried by people using words like energy, bad energy and good energy and positive energy and negative energy. All those things have no meaning to me, and I don't think they have any real meaning. But, if people want to grasp a crystal...
You can't judge all religion on the most stupid bits. That's like judging all football on the most stupid bits. I don't like football. Why is that? Well, when Eric Cantona kicked that bloke.
Cantona's getting involved with some supporters. Oh, this is outrageous.
Amma, the hugging saint, you look at her here, learn more about her here. Amma said, the question's not, is there a God? The question is there suffering? Yes, there is suffering, and what can we do about suffering? We can help one another, and we can love one another. Now, if you can do that through atheism, then do it through atheism. But a lot of people need to know that this is temporary, that we are the temporary manifestation of something greater, something complete and whole, something timeless and spaceless and absolute. And every dogma in the world has been trying to tackle and understand that. Art has been trying to represent it. Science has been trying to explain it. And no one can. We are up against the parameters. And I believe that without embracing something spiritual, something whole, something beyond human thought, we have no chance of saving ourselves and saving the planet. We are all connected to consciousness. We are all connected to one another. And to me, that sounds a little bit like God. That is some true news. Or is it true? What is the nature of truth? Is there any true news? Maybe this isn't even true news. Oh no. But do subscribe here.
Nose is a tool that is abused to fool you and to leave you scared and confused. Trews is like the nose. If the nose was true, I want some Trews. Let's have some Trews.
I'd like to thank my colleagues in the Trews party for all their good work. I will be stepping down as head of the Trews. No, I won't, because I'm just a comedian. I'm not even electable or nothing. I'm just a bloke with a laptop and a bit of mouth. Hello, welcome to the Trews. Bloody hell, what's happened? So Nick Clegg's resigned, Miliband's resigned, Nigel Farage has resigned. We're a conservative country now. Obviously, we got really into it. What I feel like from a personal perspective is like when we interviewed Miliband, we thought, oh my God, we can probably influence the outcome of an election. And now I think, you can't influence the outcome of an election. I'll tell you what I think got me into that position mentally is like when I done that interview for Paxman, I goes, I don't vote, I think voting's pointless. I sort of become a de facto spokesman for people who don't vote. But it wasn't really that, it's just I was feeling the same things they feel. It's not like I was the leader of the Don't Vote party, I was just another member of the Don't Vote party. It's not like I had any authority or power. I think for a moment I got caught up in some the thick of it, like, oh wow, Ed Miliband's in my house. Like, like people were telling me, like journalists and people that know loads about politics, look, if Labour don't get in, it's going to really be bad because Independent Living Fund will get cut, public services are going to get cut more than ever, it's going to get worse for very poor people, the climate of the country is going to become sort of mean and nasty. And now, actually, the Conservatives have won. And then there was a sort of a moment where I felt like, old media doesn't have the same sort of power that it used to. People don't listen to the front pages of The Sun and the Mail. These things seem kind of ridiculous, but evidently, that is not the case. Evidently, the old media, the establishment, is a powerful thing. David Cameron is the Prime Minister of this country with more seats than before. After all of the things that have been happening for the last 5 years, the result is, let's keep that guy in charge. I guess over that whole process, we sort of thought like, oh, the Greens are trying their best. And we did that thing with Caroline Lucas, and Caroline Lucas has been elected again. But like they made really clear to us that the Greens can never have any meaningful power. The only conclusion I can draw from this is a time where, you know what, like evidently a lot of people want the Conservatives in power because they voted for them, and the Conservatives are now in power. People that don't want that, people that really want an alternative, whether it's a moderate alternative of a Labour government that seems a bit piecemeal and doesn't want to change things enough, or a radical and unelectable kind of Green Party, or an even more radical system that's wholly unrecognisable, where people live in tune with compassion and altruism and community and stand up to big business and stand up to the city. Wherever you fall on the line of not the Conservative but those people, the only currency we have is compassion and being nice to one another, we're going to have no shortage of meanness over the next 5 years. There's going to be meanness to the disabled, there's going to be meanness to immigrants, there's going to be meanness to the poor. So all we've got left is to be compassionate to one another and get involved in causes we care about. Like, my only regret in this is I thought that I could be involved. Like, you know, me and like Gareth, who I do this with, people are telling us we could make an influence, and even though it's only a sort of a small thing, it would be better if the independent living fund's not cancelled, if education's not cut, if health's not cut. I mean, I was at the doctor with my mum today, and thank God she's all right. That really sort of put things in perspective, and I thought, thank God I'm in a position where I can take care of my mother as well, because it's going to be a lot harder for people that can't. The only thing that I can look to positively is that change does happen. Syriza's happened in Greece, even though they're now fighting the giants of the EU to bring about anything meaningful. Podemos look like they're going to do something in Spain the next election, and I think there is a possibility for a new kind of politics. Not long ago, a slim majority like this, like the Tories are going to get, would have been looked at as a disaster. Now for them, it's looked at as a huge victory. That's an indication that politics has changed in some way. What I've personally learned is I don't understand that world, and I intuitively don't like it. My feeling is that change is going to come from us, come from ordinary people working together. So the Trews, what we're going to do is we're just going to talk to you about what we feel and sort of really step away from that stuff, you know, and stay near communities, near people that are actually doing stuff, whether it's in the issues of housing, ecological issues. We've got to find new ways of making alliances, new ways of making change, because we ain't going to get any help from the government. We're going to get screwed. We're going to get screwed. For me as a wealthy person in Britain, this is all right. I'll be taxed less than I would have done probably under Labour, but for me as a human being, I'm now part of a society that has explicitly said immigrants, poor people, NHS users, you are all in a lot of trouble. So one thing I know for certain is there's going to be no shortage of meanness, so let's not bandy it about one another. We've got to find new ways of being compassionate and new ways of making change. That's some true news. Subscribe here.
Is a tool that is abused to fool you and to leave you scared and confused. Trews is like the news. If the news was true, I want some Trews. Let's have some Trews.
Hello there, I'm Russell Brand. This is The Trews. I'm the host of it. Subscribe here. In today's episode of The Trews, I'm looking at Vox 5. They've attacked me. I've not watched it yet, but I know they've said mean things about me, and I'm a person like you, not like those weird alien folk on Fox News who we'll be looking at now.
Yesterday, I mentioned Scruff Bucket, Russell Brand's attack on FNC's Jason Riley regarding his opinions on Ferguson.
Firstly, it's really amazing that Fox News is putting this on, The Trews, which just me and Gareth just make this on our own. In this case, literally in a farmyard.
So what did Brand actually say?
Jason Riley, editorial board member of the Wall Street Journal and author of the book, Please Stop Helping Us, How Liberals Make It Harder for Blacks to Succeed.
Author of the book, I am a convenient African American who will betray my racial roots for Fox News.
You can see my analysis of Jason Riley's completely parenthesised by it's surprising that Fox News will stoop so low to prevent anti-Ferguson coverage. A community where people clearly have legitimate grievances against authority because they keep shooting people. The police keep shooting people. And to get somebody on from, at least superficially, the same community to condemn those protesters and to say things like Ferguson, the events in Ferguson are about black behaviour and black attitudes towards the criminal justice system. In these neighbourhoods, young black men have no sense of what it means to be male or what it means to be black.
Jason, what about the president's comments and how this all fits together?
One thing he said today is he talked about black crime a little bit, which I was happy to see. He said black criminals should be prosecuted, which is helpful. But then he attributed that black criminality, he suggested it stems from poverty or a racist criminal justice system, which is nonsense.
Then he assumed Jason must live among whites, the traitor.
I can imagine he lives in a white neighbourhood, that fella. Where would you find support? I'm a white person, I'm outraged almost racially by this sense of betrayal.
My comments about Jason Riley were not specifically relating to his race. That was additionally surprising, as it would be if I started condemning people from working class neighbourhoods in Britain or drug users in Britain. If I suddenly went on, drug addicts should be put in jail, that would be surprising. Here's some information from a UN study taken in 2012 about the relationship between poverty and crime. In 2012, a UN study concluded that crime was both the cause and consequence of poverty, insecurity and underdevelopment. Most importantly, what is revealed is the unmistakable connection between poverty and crime. They are both geographically concentrated in a strikingly consistent way. In other words, where you find poverty is where you also find crime. That's a UN study in 2012. And the reason that Fox News have to work hard to deny it and bring on pundits like Jason Riley and human vitriol propellers like Greg there is because of the obvious truth of the situation. We all know that Fox News is a corrupt propagandist organisation. It's just astonishing the depths that they will plummet in order to prevent the truth reaching people. In this case, the truth that the people of Ferguson have legitimate grievances against authority after a long history of exploitation and some recent examples of brutality.
So apparently all blacks must live together. How open-minded, Brand. So rather than debate, Brand smears the man racially, deeming him not black enough to suit Brand's stereotype.
It's really interesting because Fox is not a news organisation. Fox is a context removal system. You know, tyranny is the removal of nuance. Take that example there. I didn't say all black people have to live together. I'm from an ordinary background. I don't have those kind of beliefs. Fox News is that.
Well, say you're a cocaine dealer, and you kind of look like one a little bit.
As usual, we bring them over here, and we teach a bunch of Chinese people.
A Hispanic male, not a black male, not a Chinese male with his eyes like this.
Sean, I'm going to tell you this right now. I dealt with people like this for 20 years. They will get up every day. They will kill somebody and go have some chicken at KFC.
Here are some other things that I think are even more racist from Fox News.
How's this? The Congresswoman, you saw what happened to Whitney Houston. Step away from the crack pipe. Step away from the Xanax. Step away from the Lorazepam because it's going to get you in trouble. How would she explain those comments?
Oh, man. I'm not a media organisation that has the power to change millions of lives, that has a vested interest in corporate power, that comes from a corporate mindset, that is part of the machine that oppresses people.
But what do you expect? Brand's a victim of arrested development. He's just getting to that undergrad lusting for revolution phase. The dope just can't wait for the government to impose his version of utopia.
I wouldn't be waiting for the government to do it. They're our chiefest opponents in the endeavour. I'm not just reaching a revolutionary phase. This is an entrenchant ideology that belongs to people from my background and is rising all over the world in the face of Fox News. And look at the way that they talk. When anyone countenances their argument, look how angry they get. Look how frightened they are because their brittle power structures can easily be overwhelmed and undermined when we bond together.
I'd say this is the worst thing Brand has ever done. But then again, I saw Arthur.
That was really bad.
Arthur is a terrible movie. You know, no wonder, Kimberly, Katy Perry says she doesn't need a man. After marriage to Brand, who would want one?
They're really taking a lot of time to do this. This is the news. I've not had time to research Greg's background, and this is like a thing I'm doing like on YouTube. This is like the properly, hello, welcome to the news. Remember when you were a kid? Hello, here's the news at 10. This is the news. He's gone right now. What else has he done, this bastard?
Oh, he's the cure. Let me tell you. You'd be like, whoa, I'm staying away from that.
He didn't even call her when he wanted a divorce. He texted it to her.
It's kind of extraordinary this is allowed. The deification and the canonization of the trivial, the ugly, and the mundane. This is a venom factory.
He's such a hypocrite because this is a guy preaching revolution from the back seat of a limo, like he can relate and understand, and then mocks people who are actually just covering the news.
That's just a way of prohibiting the argument. They'll do anything to keep these subjects off the agenda. Police brutality, inequality. They'll do anything within their power to prevent the truth reaching you. I've got no vested interest. As they have pointed out themselves, I'm a person that if there's a more equal society, I'll have less money. So what possible motivation could I have?
You know what bugs me, Andrea? 10 years ago, I love this guy. I used to host a show called Big Brother's Big Mouth in England.
How's that getting mentioned on Fox News? I mean, I love Big Brother's Big Mouth. That was good broadcasting.
But then something happened, and I think it's the Arrested Development. He developed fake intelligence that you often see.
I look forward to the day when you discover intelligence, Greg.
In a freshman at college, where you think you have all the answers, and it's like you just discovered it, and it's so exciting and new, and everybody's going, "You're almost 40, dude."
Yeah, that's why they call them sophomores, because in Greek it means wise fool. You get a little bit of knowledge under your belt after your freshman year, and then you're a sophomore.
My proudest achievement so far is I've actually made Fox News convey some information there. We've at least learned the definition of a word, something you don't typically expect from this outlet.
I did not know who Russell Brand was until you told me that he actually had a career before he married Katy Perry.
Yes, he did.
I only knew he was like a drug addict, sex addict, loser.
Yeah.
Drug addiction is a disease. I mean, like, I can take a little bit of criticism, particularly from some quarters. But like, what about the countless millions of other people blighted by the disease of addiction that are casually being condemned? People that are criminalised and imprisoned. Prisons across the United States and America filled with drug users who happen to be disproportionately from a certain community that Fox News tacitly and frequently condemns. Those people too are dragged down by your callous use of language. It's good that you looked up the word sophomore. Take a little more time with the dictionary.
But ideology has twisted his brain.
His brain's been twisted by an ideology that seems to be based on fairness.
But he turned angry at some point. At some point, he flipped. Some switch flipped in his mind, and he became angry. He's angry at Fox. He's angry at capitalism. He's angry at America.
He got sober.
Right. Well, I don't know what it is.
He got sober.
You're right, actually. I am angry at Fox and capitalism because these institutions are contributing to the deterioration of our planet. I'm going to give you some factual information that might be helpful for you to understand Fox News. But these people, there's no point criticising them on a personal level. They're basically beautiful people, basically. A study by Media Matters for America found that between August 1st and October the 1st, 2013 on Fox News, 75% of mentions of climate science cast doubt on it as a possibility. In 2012, the Union of Concerned Scientists found that 93% of global warming coverage by Fox News was misleading. The misleading statements identified in the report included dismissals of human-caused climate change, disparaging comments about individual scientists, rejections of climate science as a body of knowledge, and cherry-picking of data. That's what they do all the time. Right now, here's some information. Rupert Murdoch, you sort of think, oh, why are they doing that? Why would they present information in that way? Rupert Murdoch has stakes in Shell Oil Company, LLC. Oh, an energy giant. Studies also show that Fox News and Murdoch-owned news outlets generally support US military action against Syria. They do not inform viewers and readers that Mr. Murdoch has a vested interest in a war in Syria. Rupert Murdoch is a part owner of an Israeli-American company that has been granted the rights to explore for oil on the Golan Heights, Israeli-occupied Syrian land. It's highly unethical for Fox News not to disclose this information to its viewers. So, Fox News lies about climate change. Rupert Murdoch is an investor in a shale gas and energy giant, LLC. Rupert Murdoch would personally benefit from there being a war in Syria. Fox News supports war in Syria. Dick Cheney, the former Vice President of the United States, is also on the board of LLC. So you see there's a relationship between republicanism, American neoconservatism, and the energy-based wars in the Middle East that Fox News supports, and as well as their more general support of the repression of people. Any uprising, as we've witnessed in Ferguson, they have to condemn that because that is the threat to this mentality. When people come together and confront corporate power and state power, that's the beginning of the end for these organisations. What they're dealing with is something that's really serious. In June 2010, News Corporation, Rupert Murdoch's company, donated $1 million to the Republican Governors Association. So, that's a sort of a clear and obvious tie between republicanism, that's the sort of the neoconservative ideology that this lot are into, and Rupert Murdoch. But more obviously, it's a cultural, tribal, ideological bond, and probably deep corporate and financial relationships that mean that their coverage of the news is constantly biased. And me, just a person with a laptop and a mate and a camera, they have to come down hard on this stuff. And in it, they'll drag down anything that sort of perceived kind of lasciviousness, history as a drug addict, lack of education. They'll attack anything because what they know is what you know, is that ordinary people, if we communicate, if we're honest, we can destroy this nonsense and move forward, because eventually, why would we continue to cooperate with a system that oppresses us and exploits us? Why would we continue to cooperate? There'll be more and more examples of unrest. There'll be more and more disturbances. There'll be more and more fear and prejudice from Fox News. But ultimately, Greg and the Fox News Furious 5, or whatever the hell you were called when you used to train that panda, you will ultimately lose. That is the truth.
Is a tool that is abused to fool you and to leave you scared and confused. Trews is like the news. If the news was true, I want some Trews. Let's have some Trews.
Hello, welcome to the Trews. Politics Week continues. We've already done the Lib Dems and UKIP, haven't we? Today it's the turn of Labour. You know from the papers and that. Ed Miliband came round here, you know, from that photo and all that kind of stuff. So let's see what happened when I spoke to Ed Miliband about the forthcoming election, about Labour and what we should do as a country. Ed, thank you for coming to talk to us here in the run-up to the election. It's very grateful for you.
Pleasure.
You must be bloody worn out, are you?
No, I'm busy, but I'm glad to be here.
A lot of us feel that what's happened in politics is that there's these unelected, powerful elites that really control things from behind the scenes, not in a conspiratorial way, just in an economic way. And those powerful elites have really got their talons into the Tory party. For me, and for a lot of people that don't vote, that's where that frustration emanates from. It certainly isn't apathy, Ed. It's a sense of, what's the point? What we feel is like, well, they, you know, the suffragettes, they may have given their lives for the right to vote. The people in power worked out, okay, we've got to give votes to women. Let's just now make sure that their votes mean very little. And you know, and since then, since suffrage, since the right of women to vote, what has meaningfully occurred?
That's totally wrong.
Go on, mate.
Well, look, workers' rights, a national health service, a minimum wage, I mean, lesbian and gay rights. Now, look, the whole point about this is they happen. I don't actually take the view that some politicians take, which is all about the great politicians who make the change happen. Of course, it's people that make it happen, but it's a combination of politics and people. And look, those changes, I mean, yeah, the suffragettes, incredibly important moment, the right for women to vote. But think about the Equal Pay Act in the 1970s, Barbara Castle, right? It took the
still ain't fully happened. Though,
okay, but hang on a minute.
For women.
It took the workers at Ford to make it happen, to push Barbara Castle to make it happen. But then it did happen. Now you got
not entirely.
Yeah, it hasn't happened properly. But look, it's all about how does progress come. Progress comes through people demanding change, politics responding, not all the way, and people pushing for that change to carry on. But without the politics, and this is maybe just part of our, not exactly disagreement, part of the issue here, without politics, without government, the change doesn't happen. That's what happens in a democratic society.
Absolutely. Now, the frustrations that I was describing, Ed, and the thing that I think is the core of the modern issue when it comes to the disengaged and the disenfranchised people in this country at the moment, what we see is bankers committing flagrant fraud, no one going to prison. HSBC committing fraud and helping people avoid tax, nobody going to prison, no consequences.
Okay, before we get on to HSBC, I'm not trying to avoid the question, but do you accept my fundamental point?
The NHS, yeah. The NHS, of course these things are important, Ed. I think these are valuable points. My mother's only alive as a result of the National Health Service.
Exactly.
So what we are talking about now is, in the age of PFI, in the age of continuing privatisation of these public institutions, of the transference of power and wealth from ordinary people to the richest 1% and beyond to corporations and super elites. What can, as you have said, politics and people have to work in harmony. Now the people have made their disillusionment clear, their frustration clear, their loss and despair clear. You, as a politician, as the potential leader of the country, what are you going to do to take on those powerful forces that we believe are beyond politics?
Okay, but I promise you I'm not avoiding the question here. But
then you've got to answer it,
I will answer it, but there's two issues here. There's does politics make change happen? And what scale of change are we talking about?
Yeah.
Now, the problem I had with some of the things that you've said is you've implied that the first is like there's no change happens. Well, it's just like wrong. It's just wrong. Change has happened and it will happen.
Yeah.
Now, let me come to your
point. My main point is, will you confront those powerful interests? Because, of course, like, you know, there's no one in Britain that doesn't love the NHS. There's no one in Britain that would have wanted 5,000...
but it was politics that had made it happen.
Well, no, as you said, it was ordinary people pushing politics.
And politics.
Great, so politics is a given, people is a given. How are we going to work harmoniously to deliver what the people of Britain need right now? And what the people of Britain need is someone that's going to say, you lot, don't you worry about HSBC, don't you worry about bankers, I'm your man, I'm going to go in there and take care of this stuff.
My whole argument in this campaign, I think this is the central thing that we've got to confront as a country, is who is the country run for? Is it just run for the richest and most powerful, or is it run for working people? I think that's the biggest question that we face as a country. I actually think it's the biggest question that most Western countries face. It's rooted in inequality, an unequal society. I think a more equal society is a more successful society. And that's why we need to have a system and a plan, that's what we've got in this election, to change the way the country works.
How do we do that, Ed? How do we do that? How do we sort of like...
I mean, look, well, you reform the banks, but we need banks that are going to work for businesses. I mean, banks are a good thing, not a bad thing.
Could we see bankers going to prison for like some of the rate rigging, the Libor scandal?
Yeah, of course, if there's fraud committed by bankers.
It's evident that there was.
Of course, if there's fraud committed by bankers, that should happen. But there's a bigger issue than that, which is how you have a banking system that works for your ordinary small businesses that need the help, for your customers that need the help, and that's what our plan does. The energy companies. You know, we want energy companies that are successful, but we also need energy companies that aren't ripping people off and are giving people a fair deal. We want to confront the tax avoiders. We want to make sure that people don't avoid their taxes. You know, the non-doms, the people who live in this country, work in this country, permanently settled in this country. It's what I say, it shouldn't be sort of one rule for the richest and most powerful, another rule for everybody else. It's one rule for everybody. And that's the sort of society I believe in.
Do you? That's because I think that's what a lot of us feel is tough to get purchase on. Like, for example, it's like the 850 billion that it cost to bail out the banks in 2008. Like, during the time since then, we've lost 840 billion to tax evasion. So, like, that's the kind of money that's available to be captured, which in a way challenges the myth of austerity.
It was right to bail out the banks.
Right. I mean,
because it wasn't about the banks; it was about ordinary people's savings. You remember those queues starting to form, Northern Rock and all that. I mean, that's about ordinary people's savings and what was going to happen to ordinary people's savings.
So in a way, within the current political paradigm, we do have no choice. This feeling, which I suppose Nigel Farage capitalises on, of like, ordinary people aren't, it doesn't seem like there's a real choice, so that in the end when someone with a pint on their head turns up, it seems like a valid and interesting
I'm not planning to do
alternative. No, I don't think that's not your speech.
I'm not sure I'd look so good with a pint on my head.
I don't think either of us would benefit from a balancing act at this moment. Unless it's a sort of an economical balancing act, Ed, which is something that we really need to look at. No, like, so what it feels like to us is that whoever it is in power, those people don't operate on behalf of us, ordinary people. They operate on behalf of transnational corporations, and they operate on behalf of the financial industry. It sort of feels like, what we feel like is, there's nothing that can be done. Why is this not happening? We see these things unfold, and then there's no one goes to prison. Things don't get any better. No one proposes an alternative. That's the area.
There is an alternative. And look, it's all about, do you learn the lessons? Look, for me, and it's different for you, obviously, it's about how do you make practical change happen, practical change that people can believe in. Now, practical doesn't mean sort of non-existent. It doesn't mean not real. It means, a high minimum wage. That is about saying, look, let's tackle inequality. Hard work should be rewarded for everybody in our country. 0 hours contracts, you probably know about 0 hours contracts. People who...
All this lot are on them.
Don't know. I'm sure they're not. I hope they're not. Otherwise I'm going to get very angry with you. Look, it is about saying, is a text message at 6 a.m. in the morning to tell you whether you got work or not, is that a good way to run a country? That's where we made progress on workers' rights, but we've sort of gone backwards.
Yeah.
The NHS, opportunities for young people. This isn't like bread and butter of politics. This is what really matters to people.
For me, what I've learned is like sort of because of geopolitical influences, because of global finances, it seems that it's very difficult at a domestic level to leverage serious influence. So when we
It's
have
just not true. It's just not true.
So you are in a position to confront these powerful organisations, the financial industry, transnational corporations, like say for example, this little stat.
Can I just put it in a particular way to you, right? Which you may not like.
Well, it's better for me to put it in your language, and it's better for me to put it in my language, because if you can understand me, it's better.
Okay, fine.
Right. Say for example, right, like sort of average UK worker pays 20% normal tax, right? Sure. Amazon paid 0.05% on 4 billion sales.
Yeah, we've got.
Do we have the power to do that?
Of course you do.
How?
Well, first of all, you've got to do it internationally.
Yeah.
Because these companies are mobile around the world, and that is hard yards, but you've got to do it. And secondly, you've got to be willing to act on your own where you can. Look, there are different countries that have different ways of dealing with these things. Some are more successful than others. So of course there are ways to deal with it. It doesn't mean it's easy in a world where capital and companies are mobile. Of course you can deal with these things. And of course people share your outrage about companies that don't pay their taxes, and it can be dealt with. But you've got to have a government that is willing to say there's something wrong with this and we're going to deal with it.
You're that government?
Yeah.
Now, I know you've had a bit of a scrap with Rupert Murdoch before. There's no love lost between me and him. Like I've said this before to politicians. What it feels like, and I hope it doesn't sound adolescent, but what it feels like to us is like, if Rupert Murdoch has this kind of power, this kind of media voice, if you are like the Prime Minister of Britain, can't you just go, right, I'm Prime Minister now, we're passing some legislation that means that monopolies are going to be significantly broken up. So Rupert Murdoch, it's been great, but now you can only own 10% or 15% of total media. Is that kind of thing a possibility? Because people want it.
We said in our manifesto you've got to look at these issues of media ownership and all that. And I've spoken out against Rupert Murdoch on phone hacking and what happened to ordinary members of the public who were victims of phone hacking and intrusion and all of those things. The thing I'd say to you though about this, these people are less powerful than they used to be.
Yeah, I get that.
They're less powerful than they used to be.
They're still a bit too powerful.
Yeah, look, media ownership really matters. It's something I care about. As I say, we've set out in our manifesto that we're going to definitely look at the issue. But
are you able to make proper pledges or not? Because it's too
well, I'm not making
edgy.
a pledge now. No, it's not about edgy. You've got to look at how you make it work properly. Of course, you've got to look at that. Look, I'm not diminishing Rupert Murdoch, right?
You should be diminished.
Yeah, but
diminish him down.
Yeah, okay, but he's much less powerful than he used to be. The British people have a lot more sense than some of these papers give them credit for.
Well, there's no doubt about that, but it's still a concern when you've someone in Murdoch's power who's in because what it feels like.
And you've got to be willing to stand up to these powerful forces, and I am.
Are you willing to?
Yeah.
The reason I have never voted in my life is because I think it don't matter which one. We all got excited about Tony Blair. We all got excited about Barack Obama. What happened?
But hang on a minute. Look, this is an important point. I'm not looking for euphoria, right? I know that sounds a bit weird. Obviously, I want to get rid of the Tory government, and that's going to be a very good thing for the country. First of all, you don't want politicians saying, vote for me, and on day one, the world is transformed. It ain't going to be like that. Right? It ain't going to be like that. Change is hard, right?
Yes.
Change takes time, and I'm not being a civil servant. I'm just saying that that's the reality. That's the first point. Secondly, change happens not in a kind of, it requires pressure, and it takes effort, and it takes people to demand the change to happen. So I'm not looking for euphoria. I'm looking for a sense of this is real, concrete, deliverable change. But I actually think that's what people want. I think that we're in a world where people are past the idea of, this bloke comes along and he says, vote for Ed Miliband, and if I'm in Downing Street on day one, life is kind of totally turned upside down. First of all, I don't think people want it, and secondly, I don't think people would believe it. I think people want, kind of a sense that the country's run in a different way, that it's run for them again. I think the fundamental problem with this country is that people think it's run for somebody else, and the somebody else is probably somebody right at the top of society. They've got the access, the influence, the power, and it's not run for them. And that's what we've got to change.
That is exactly it. What we need to feel, normal people, is that there is the will in politicians, that they're getting into politics not because of cronyism, not because of careerism, but because they want to represent ordinary people in the face of powerful elites that seem to somehow be beyond the grasp of ordinary politics, whether it's the financial sector, this sort of housing crisis that's going on in London, where it's before our eyes being socially cleansed of ordinary people, while empty towers that are essentially money, never built to be lived in, are erected all over the place. There's a real sense that how is this happening? There's nothing we can do. And I completely agree with you, Ed. We don't want some sort of giddy, yes we can euphoria. We want a bloke who's going to say, look, I'm in this for the right reasons. I'm prepared to take on Murdoch. I'm prepared to take on HSBC. I'm prepared to take on the powerful elites that have got control of the Tory party, that if the Tory party are given any longer in charge of this country, could drive it into the ground, the very fabric of society itself being torn apart by them and the vested interests of powerful elites. I think people don't want euphoria at this time. I think people want security and stability and an end to that fear.
Yeah. Well, look, I agree with you that the prospect of another 5 years of the Tories is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
Incredibly dangerous for who the country works for. It's incredibly dangerous for the NHS. It's incredibly dangerous for, I think their fundamental view is that the only way we succeed as a country is low pay, insecurity for most people, and, the wealthiest get their tax cuts and the wealth trickles down to somebody else. And that's what we've got to change about the country. And we can change it. And look, I think we need to encourage people to vote and be part of that change, not on the basis, as you say, of giddy euphoria, but on the basis of things can be. Look. I've got a simple idea, which is Britain can be better. The Tories want to say this is as good as it gets for the country, and this isn't as good as it gets for the country. This can't be as good as it gets for the country, and I think that is about where the stakes are.
So there we are. I think we learned a lot about Labour. We learned a lot about Ed Miliband. It's not a perfect interview, but personally I found it a very interesting experience. And I think it says a lot about Ed Miliband that he understands the way that media works now, the way that the country feels at the moment, the way that people feel, that he was prepared to come around here and talk to us at the Trews. Trews Politics Week continues. Tomorrow we're talking to the Greens. We're going to be talking to Natalie Bennett and Caroline Lucas. We go to them. They are women. Politeness does mean something in Britain today. I'm just a normal guy from Essex. Watch the Trews tomorrow. Politics Weeks continues. True News, subscribe here.
Nose is a tool that is abused to fool you and to leave you scared and confused. Trews is like the news. If the news was true, I want some Trews. Let's have some Trews.